we're going to get to know each other a little bit better in this first 30 seconds. So raise your hand if you've ever wanted to be famous. Yes. Okay. Okay. Usually when I ask that question, people are like hesitant to raise their hands, but I knew I was at least going to get that out of like Mike and Jen. So thank you. Like planning on that one. Be weird if they didn't raise their hand. So studies actually show us that 1 in 2 adults would like to be at least a little bit famous. So sometimes I ask this question to like, larger audience and nobody raises their hand because we have this sense of like shame around being famous or wanting fame. And we're going to get rid of all of that during this presentation. Because I actually think that as business owners, it's in our best interest to want to be famous. Merriam-Webster, our good friends over at the dictionary, tell us that famous means to be widely known and honored for achievement. So I think you'd be hard pressed to find a business owner that doesn't want to have those things. Sounds pretty good to business or for business to me. So I am Katrina. I'm the founder and CEO of Knockout Directive. So we help entrepreneurs create famous brands. We specialize in branding and publicity. So I have a background in public relations. And as I started my agency, I always noticed that business owners would hesitate to put PR into their marketing strategy. And they would actually tell me that I was being unrealistic by telling them it was a tactic that they should start to use. And I love talking to audiences in real estate and interior design because that's actually where I spent a lot of my career. Shape Properties is a large mixed-use commercial residential developer out of Vancouver. I worked for Shape for almost 4 years on the commercial property management side of things. We worked on some amazing brands, really specialized in telling those stories. I also worked for some boutique developers, real estate marketing companies, and I've had lots of clients in interior design and trade. So I've spent a lot of time telling business owners that they need to start using PR in their business, and I've had lots of pushback against whether or not they're ready to use it. I'm like, wow, okay, Katrina. So a lot of time we think that PR looks like this. So we've got Times Square, red carpets, magazines, billboards, celebrities. The Hill was a show of my generation that focused on one of PR in LA, Kardashian. Gen Z actually loves to think of PR as PR calls, which if you're not familiar, it's when a company sends samples of products to influencers expecting that they'll share it online. There was a time in my business when I would write or run Google ads for my business, and I received an influx of Gen Zers, not with a big enough budget to invest in PR services, but they wanted to know how they could have PR hauls sent to them. So we had to rejig that campaign. And Samantha Jones, obviously an iconic public relations executive and unmarried woman, 2 things I relate to her on substantially. So we think that this is what PR looks like. It's also what we think being famous looks like. But a lot of my clients are often surprised that PR looks more like this. So we've got like TV shows, podcasting, magazines, attending events. So speaking at them or actually just networking, trade shows. And we've also got content creation on this slide too, which is a very, very important part of PR that's often neglected when we start thinking about using PR in our business. So one thing that's really important to keep in mind as we move along here is that I look at famous as an adjective. Okay, so in today's day and age, I'm sure we've said before, anybody can be famous, or how did that person get famous? And that's because there is no measurement for how famous somebody is, at least in my world, talking about becoming famous. It's an adjective. So it's just a state of being. No one can tell you if you feel famous today or tomorrow, or maybe when someone follows you from social media, when you're after this event, maybe you've received a few new followers that can make someone feel famous, and that's just up to you. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind in this presentation, because oftentimes we think about PR as this like big, shiny, sparkly thing that's out of reach. It's actually not that far away. So we're going to go back to this slide for a minute just to look at some of these examples again, because I really focus on content creation as a part of PR. And that's because of, I'll let my good friends, okay, that I thought a different slide was coming up. But that brings me to this point is when we talk about securing PR opportunities, we have two ways of securing them, okay? There's only two ways. You will not find another way. The first one is to receive them, and that is by having a brand. So if we go back to this slide, you need to do these brand building tactics like social media, photography, videography, even going live on Instagram. You need to do these kind of things to be able to organically receive opportunities from your network. The other way that you can receive or secure opportunities, I should say, is to actively pitch yourself to opportunities. So that's more traditional PR, right? That's what we think of when a publicist is reaching out on our behalf to maybe get us featured in a magazine or secure a TV interview. But I strongly believe that, both of these are important. When I work with business owners, we do both of these. Most business owners just want to do this part because they think we can skip this part. But if you don't do this is likely, in my world, I would say probably next to impossible to be successful at most of the time, especially now. And if you don't believe me, just take this little anecdote from Steve Forbes, who's the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. Most business owners I chat to say oh, I would love to be in Forbes one day. So if Steve, my good friend Steve, is telling you that your brand is the single most important investment you can make in your business and not PR is the single most investment business, when he's literally the editor of the magazine everyone wants to get into, I think you would believe him. So if you don't believe anything I say, okay, listen to Steve. Okay, so when we talk about brand building or building a press-worthy, story-worthy brand, I love to use a framework from a popular business book called Blue Ocean Strategy. Anybody read it? Okay. I felt like Martin would have so much in common. So it's a great business book. I really love it. Encourage everybody to read it. But the general premise is if you are doing business in a red ocean, there are sharks. They're chomping at you. The sharks are your competition. The ocean is red. Maybe a bit hard to swim through because of all of the stuff from the sharks chomping at each other. I'm trying not to go too graphic here, but you got the point. So that's like swimming or doing business in a red ocean. It is hard and it feels hard to get out of, and it's not a great place to be. When you're doing business in a blue ocean, there are no competitors around you. There are no sharks. Turquoise water, beautiful sunny day. In my blue ocean strategy, I'm on a mega yacht, okay? So that's what a blue ocean brand can do to you or do for you. So in a blue ocean brand, we have 3 different components that we like to focus on. And this book tells us that if you don't incorporate these things, your strategy is going to be muddled, undifferentiated, hard to communicate, which is a really hard quality to work with when it comes to PR. Also going to have a high cost structure. So let's talk about these 3 very important things and what that looks like for our business when we're really working on our brand and trying to build it up to a place where we can receive the PR opportunities that we want. So the first one is to find your focus. So most business owners I chat with tell me that, I don't want to just focus on one service because I offer so many different things. I can do photography, but I can also do videography, and I'm also a model, and I do social media management. And that's awesome. We can run businesses that do all of these great big things. But if we want to become well known for something, we really need to pick one to become known for. Think about the biggest celebrities of our time. People become famous for one thing. So what are some examples? Elvis, king of rock and roll. Robin Williams became famous for his comedic acting. Got Kim Kardashian with her favorite tape that's out there. All of these people became famous for just one thing. So when we look at our own business, we pick the one thing that we really love doing. It's also the thing that we're usually pretty good at. So I bring this example from when I used to work for Shape. Shape does many things with the development. They do fabulous mixed-use commercial residential, but they also do capital investing. They also do commercial property management. They do residential development, so many different things. But when I worked for Shape, we became known for taking old, decrepit shopping centers and knocking them down and creating fabulous, modern, mixed-use communities. And that's really what Shape became known for. So I got to spend some time working on the in Brentwood a few years ago, and that was really the transformation that we were sharing during that period of time, is taking the old Brentwood Town Center and turning it into something so fabulous. So while Shape did many things, they really leaned into this one storyline in the press. At that time, obviously these things evolved, but that's what they became known for. So we'll use Shape as a little bit of an example through these three important qualities. So the next thing to keep in mind when we're building a blue ocean brand is our differentiation. I am the first one to get a little bit intimidated by my competitors whenever I see another PR person, or I do a lot of personal branding. And if you follow me online, it's what my brand is built on. I get a little oh my God, what are they saying? Is it cooler than what I'm saying? Does it sound better? And I feel like this is really common for a lot of our business owners that look at our competitors, especially when they're a bit flashy and they look like they got it going on. And we want to start creating content or telling stories that sound like theirs, because it looks like if it's working for them, it must work for us. Don't do that. I actually put all my competitors on mute, and I'll do little check-ins on social media once in a while. Okay, what are they doing? What are they saying? Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time going down this rabbit hole, but check mark, I'm still different. So I recommend doing that exercise once in a while, but don't play into this, I must do things like them, because your differences are actually your opportunity to stand out. So bringing Shape back into the conversation, I was the marketing director at a small regional shopping center called High Street in Abbotsford for about 4 years. And High Street became known for having a pretty bad retail mix, because we were a new shopping center and Shape was new into the commercial property management sphere at the time. So we didn't have the big shiny retailers that a Willowbrook and Langley was getting, or even if you're familiar with the Valley, there was another older center called Seven Oaks that had more of the common mall retailers that you would have as a local shopping center. So we were becoming known in our community for having a pretty bad retail mix. So we used the opportunity to become known for something else. We became a community gathering place in Abbotsford. We hosted amazing $1 million events every single year. And this is actually a photo from my time at Shape. So this is from December 2020. So first COVID Christmas. Typically in a normal year, Shape or at High Street, we would host an amazing $1 million Christmas show. Marching band, professional lighting, music, custom design for the show, dancers, professional musicians, the whole thing. We do this every single year. And we became known in our community for hosting this. So obviously, December 2020, you were not allowed to host super spreader events at that time. You actually weren't allowed to host anything. There were no markets. We weren't even able to do Santa photos. And that was obviously lower mainland, province, Canada. It was widespread. So instead of slashing our marketing budget, I was honestly shocked to retain the job for that long. Shape actually said, take your budget and figure out how you can create a socially distant activation when no one else is running anything. So this was our Christmas tree that we had become known for, the second tallest in Canada next to the Eaton Center. So we still had a program with all of our music and light. And we actually built a light activation underneath the tree where people in your bubble, for that language, your bubble could go walk the runway and then end up inside the activation, and you would film your own dance video. This was during the rise of TikTok. Film your own dance video inside the tunnel. We got on our local news. We used to say that PTV Global would never come across the bridge. Looking at Jen, would never come across the bridge to Abbotsford to film anything in the Fraser Valley. What they did that year, because there was nothing else going on. So we really leaned into our differentiation, really held confidence in our marketing budget, and executed something that literally nobody else wants. So, that's all stemming from a retail mix that wasn't awesome, which if you read through the Google reviews, they would say that. But there were also so many Google reviews that would say, they host amazing events. And now, actually, 3 years later, Shake no longer manages the center. That's actually why I stopped working there. And that new management company took away all the marketing budget, all the marketing team, and no longer runs events or invest in their marketing. And you can tell. So if you scroll social media, now you're kind of like, okay, what's special about this place? And that's my point. They've lost their differentiation. Okay. So thirdly, claim your value in a tagline. This is often like the most challenging part of that blue ocean strategy, because how do you really like sum up what you do in a tagline? It can be really hard. So this is something I usually spend quite a bit of time workshopping with business owners, but generally, blue ocean strategy tells us that it should have a clear value proposition, focus on buyer utility, memorable, avoid generic phrases. So this is Shapes. So if you can't read it, it says, we are the real estate investment, development, and management company behind Canada's most significant centers of gravity. So I think that's memorable and certainly inspiring. The value proposition and buyer utility are really in this first part, investment, development, and management. Obviously, there is value in having all three of those things together, working with a company that understands the important and how to execute all those things. So that's really what we need to focus on first when we're building our blue ocean brand, those three things. And that's how we really start to build out our own blue ocean brand and carve out a unique position in the marketplace. Now, okay, we've got our brand. So we're like, okay, I've got my blue ocean brands, now what? And this is actually where you see a lot of business owners kind of drop the ball a little bit. We think that we can launch a rebrand, shiny new website, maybe post a couple photos on social media, and we expect like the crowds to come. Like, where are all the people? And usually what has happened is we've launched something and then we've failed to continue our narrative or share our story over the months and years to follow. And then we wonder why there's no track. And David Breyer, he is kind of like an influencer in the marketing space, calls himself the brand father. He said, if you don't give the market the story to talk about, they'll define your brand story for you. And I actually think that that's the best case scenario. The fact that someone, you're not telling them what story or what narrative your brand holds and someone comes up with something else for you, well, that's awesome, because usually they're not going to talk about you at all. So there won't be a definition. So this is something, as we kind of transition into the next part of our conversation today or presentation, I really want you to take with you. Once you've got the blue ocean brand, you've got to do something with that. So this is something that clients in life would hear me say often. You can't expect anyone to share your story for you if you haven't shared it yourself first. And this is something that I feel so passionately about, and honestly, it's how I built my own business, because when I started my agency, I just thought people would come. I thought, okay, I got the shiny website, invested in new brand photography, and like, where are all the people? I wasn't telling anybody about myself. I wasn't telling anyone my blue ocean brand. I have one. And then I realized if I could start stepping up on social media and sharing some of these really special things, everything could change. And they did. And actually in a shorter time span than you would imagine. But these are the things, these are kind of the three places I suggest you start once you're really clear on that brand identity, that blue ocean brand. So the first one, investing in professional brand assets and updating them regularly. So Martin's obviously going to chat with you about photography. Even because I know there's lots of service providers in the world. As service providers, it's also your responsibility to get photos done of yourself. Lots of people don't like that. But unfortunately, if you're offering a service, people buy from people. So by starting to invest in your own professional asset, we're going to start connecting with people in a way that, maybe you haven't had before. So I actually will, for my agency, do quarterly brand shoots. And those will look different every time, different locations, different outfits, different people, bring some team members or some industry partners into the mix. But this is what keeps your brand looking fresh. It's what keeps your audience engaged. Because if you keep using the same photos, like for like a year or 2 years, people are just going to scroll on by. They've seen that same aesthetic, that same room, that same outfit. They've seen it so many times. So they're looking for something new. So we keep people engaged by constantly freshening up our presence. Second thing, maintaining a social media presence by posting about your unique position consistently. So social media feels like this big thing that we have to tackle a lot of the time. And honestly, we can make it so much more simple if we have a strategy. If we don't have a social media strategy in place, things start to feel a lot more challenging because we're just posting things, like, oh, here's what I did today. Here's my cute dog. Here's my sandwich. People still don't know what makes the difference. So we need to develop a strategy that emphasizes that blue ocean brand, your focus, your differentiation, probably put your tagline in the bio, good place to start. And by consistently posting content that reinforces the blue ocean brand, that's when you really become known for that thing, that awesome thing that you do. And then finally, we use PR to elevate the profile of our brand. So I like to think of it like that. So we've got our brands, we've got our brand story, and then we have PR. We can't do PR first before the brand because then it's just like wasted effort. At this day and age, you've heard of from Mr. Forbes himself, people don't just care about our stories unless we're giving them a LinkedIn show, unless we tell them what the value proposition is, why it makes the difference for our customers. So now that we all feel like we're ready to freshen up our brand or develop a strategy, let's talk about what PR actually can look like for us. So why do we care about public relations? I mean, it's changed my business as well as the business owners I'm so lucky to work with every single day. And that's because it does two very important things. So if you've ever struggled with lead generation for your business, brand awareness is really where you need to start investing your time and energy. So when it comes to a shortage of leads, not enough people know about it. So by investing in public relations, we actually stop this domino effect of okay, one person knows me, then I get referred to another, and then another, and it's like dominoes in a straight line. What if we could start dominoes in 10 lines? That's the benefit of going on a podcast and being put in an entirely different audience. That's the benefit of going on TV and being put in front of an entirely different audience. Start the dominoes so much faster and in so many different ways. And that builds your brand awareness faster. And for people that think you cannot build brand awareness that quickly anymore, or when I started my business, I would say, hate doing social media. I hate it. So I'm just not going to do it. And you know what? It's too hard to build a following on social media these days. So I'm just not going to do it. That was the stance that I took. And that was a selfish stance because it's not too hard. We just need to either have someone help us do it or really invest the time in doing it ourselves. So my brand awareness on Instagram particularly, because that's where I focus my efforts over the past year, call it 15 or 16 months of having an Instagram presence, because I didn't have one before I started my business, I've grown from 0 to 1,600 followers, which maybe doesn't seem like a lot, but I make most of my sales and find most of my clients through Instagram. And that's because I've capitalized on this brand awareness, growing my reach faster, but then using public relations like securing press placements or going on podcasts to grow my following through other people's audiences. So that's brand awareness and why we care about that. But brand authority is the best part, because if you're someone who's ever felt burnt out in your business, if you're I have all these clients, but no one wants to pay me enough, or I'm taking on all these smaller jobs because, it feels really hard to secure high quality leads, you probably have a bit of a brand authority problem. Because people that are positioned as experts in their industry or the authority in their space get to charge you more money for the work that they do, because you are now positioned as an expert. You pay premium prices for the service that you deliver. And brand authority is equivalent to brand perception. So by the audience perceiving that you are an expert because you are seen talking about your expertise on podcasts, or in front of an audience, or because you've been featured in an article, that increases your brand perception, how people perceive you as an expert. It's not that hard. Just need to know where to look for the opportunities and how to leverage them on social media. Um, so like, we'll get to this in a sec, but I just have to emphasize the point. A lot of the time when we start doing PR, we'll secure like podcast opportunities or articles, and then all of a sudden we feel a bit embarrassed to share them for some reason. Maybe we didn't do like our best performance, so we think, or maybe like, we feel like we're bragging, but the sharing is the most important part. And that's how you increase your brand authority, is by sharing the press placements and these opportunities to showcase your expertise. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But first, okay, since we can be a bit unfamiliar with what public relations actually is, I have found a way to kind of put it into 5 buckets. So anything, and we're going to see how loose this PR term is once I take you through the bucket. But this will show you like how broad you can start to think when it comes to building out your brand and so PR to amplify it. So the first bucket of media relations, that's what we'll think about when we think about PR. So that's like getting on TV or newspaper, like podcasts. Now that we kind of brought that into the mix. So media relations, whatever you kind of think about when you think about PR, the Samantha Joneses, the Kardashians of the world, that's media relations. There's also industry relations, which all of you are obviously familiar with. So industry relations is communicating or forming connections with people that are in your industry. So obviously going to events like these or builders events or, things that are tailored to people that work in a similar industry as you. Then what's really cool about industry relations is you can actually start to spin it on its head a little bit, and you can start to cross-promote yourself. This is where all my words start to blend together. You can start to cross-promote yourself across industries. So I actually think a lot about Leah when I talk about this, because when I was starting to get to know Leah, I noticed that she promoted her interior design firm as serving events. And like, I've never seen interior designers, but I hadn't seen an interior designer promote themselves as supporting interior design for events before. I actually never considered that was even a thing. And obviously my eyes have been opened, but that's how easy it can be to start to position yourself a little bit differently. And now Leah can start to think about, what are the event coordinator podcasts or like the event coordinator publications and events? Like, what are those that she can start to go to and talk about interior design with? That's a little like PR workshop for Leah, but I was thinking about it. I think cross-promoting yourself and finding out how you can appeal to other audiences across industries is such a powerful tool. Okay, community relations is super important as we grow our businesses. How do we continuously contribute and give back to the communities that we are so lucky to build our business in? That can be strategic partnerships with charitable organizations, can be sponsorships, could be going to events if you don't quite have a sponsorship budget yet. Maybe you're just going to a gala and maybe you bid on an auction item or something like that. But I strongly believe that if you really want to start to become famous, it starts in your own backyard. So stepping out to local events, whether they apply to your industry or not, that's the best way to start to build up that famous feeling and become known for your work, but also known for you. That's my personal branding kick again, because I think that the power of you is so powerful. Okay, so influencer relations, this is also speaking to the power of you, because I'm not talking about like the Kim Kardashian, so many Kim Kardashian references in the presentation, not by design. But influencer relations is often thought about as like the PR hall, the TikToks. That's what we think of because that's kind of how modern media has spun. But I like to think about influencer relations in such a different way. Maybe it's a bit old school, but I think that in each of our networks or circles, we have people in our lives who are more modern day or maybe a bit more traditional influencers. And I always think about Mike when I talk about being an influencer, because I actually met Mike I guess it was 3 years ago when I was still working in a corporate job in real estate development. I went to a home builder event and I won a Lutron switch for my house. I'm like, okay, cool. I didn't actually have a house at the time to install it in, but now I do. And since then, my partner has actually effectively switched out all of the switches in our house to be Lutron. Like, I've actually known in my house that the Lutron guy. So, like, oh, the Lutron guy invited me to speak at an event. That's his reputation. He's become a bit of an influencer, but more so than that, Mike is the first one to refer my business or suggest that I'm a great speaker for opportunities. So I like to have as an influencer in my circle. So I really suggest identifying who these key people are and how can you partner with them on a workshop or an Instagram Live or a podcast. So identify those people. They might not have thousands of followers or like be showing up on TikTok every day, but they can still be powerful for being themselves. Okay, and then finally, client relations. So everyone thinks sexy media relations is PR. I actually think client relations is the most important part because that is the easiest way to retain recurring revenue. The easiest business to secure is through the people that have already had previous positive experiences with you, especially in like interior design. Maybe you work with a client for a certain length of time and then they kind of drop off for a bit because maybe their home is done. Or, you know, they've moved on to another project, or maybe the market has shifted. But how do you continuously kind of stay in the realm with this person and stay connected? So the next time they inevitably have a project that they need a designer for, how are you top of mind? This by maybe sending email marketing campaigns that connect with them, social media, connecting with them on social once in a while. I love the idea of like keeping track of everyone's birthday. And then on a birthday, just send out like a little Starbucks card or a gift card of your choice to just kind of like pop your name to the top of that person's inbox. Client relations is honestly so simple. And we think that we always need to focus on the sexiness to securing new business. But I actually think like this is how successful longstanding businesses are made, are through retaining positive relationships with our clients. Okay, so getting started with PR. I didn't want to go overboard on this slide because Jen's going to talk about this way better than I ever could. But podcasting is like the gateway to PR, in my opinion. It's so accessible to every single person in this room right now because there's podcasts available at every single level. So, for example, if you feel like you have a smaller following on social media, or maybe you haven't built your brand up there at all, I suggest doing that. But then finding the podcast opportunities available to you. There are tons of platforms online where you can do this. Facebook is a great place to find these as well. You can also do some FBI squinting and see what podcasts your competitors have been on. That's a great place to differentiate your talking points, listen to their episode and see how you talk about things differently and how you can position yourself differently against them. It's also a great way to practice your key talking points. And figure out what you actually like to talk about. Sometimes we build up our businesses based on what we think it should be and what we think the market wants, and then we have to talk about it for an hour, like me right now. So you're like, okay, what do I actually enjoy talking about for an hour? And you only figure that out by actually doing it. The first podcast I was ever on was a year ago, and it actually never got published. Not sure why, and I'm not sure if that was my performance or something else, but I'm a bit relieved, honestly, because I think what I talked about back then would not even be representative of what I talk about today. And I think that's okay, brands evolve, but I would like to see a bit more alignment moving forward, especially, at that time I hadn't built out my Blue Ocean brand. I didn't know what my brand was. And so I unfortunately can't listen back to figure out what I was trying to sell at that time, but I'm sure I would have maybe wished that it didn't get published anyway. And then the best part, because we just talked about sharing our own story and building up our own social media presence, by going on podcasts, you're automatically receiving amazing opportunities to share expert positioning content. Because when you are doing a podcast on Zoom or recorded live, you are automatically captured properly. Jen will probably talk about this, but you have a microphone, you have headphones, and for some reason, people that are speaking into a microphone automatically have far more credibility than the people that aren't. And so you will actually see on social media now, a lot of these larger influencers post all of their content of them just talking into microphones, and most of it isn't actually even podcast content. It's actually just them filming their social media reel, their Instagram reel, using a microphone to make it look that way. Because that's the power of that visual of using a microphone to position yourself as an expert. So secondly, media features are another great starting point, even though they often feel a bit out of reach. So particularly when you have a geographically based business, because a lot of us in this room do, that's when you're sort of limited by how far you can stretch your audience. So like maybe you just serve North Vancouver area in your business. Well, you might feel like you're just limited to like the North Shore News and whatever can think on. That's actually the wrong way to think about it, because there are platforms out there these days where, publications like Home and Garden and Apartment Therapy and big publications are looking for your expert insight on the topic that you specialize in, but you need to know where to find those opportunities. So there are platforms called the Quoted, spelled QWOTD, and DM me on Instagram and put this video. And Featured are great places where you can set up an account and actually receive alerts for the topic that you're an expert on. And you have the opportunity to pitch apartment therapy on your expertise. Now, that hasn't been done before. In the 10 years that I worked in PR, being able to have that kind of access directly to journalists has never happened. And so if you are a person who specializes in design on the North Shore, imagine how much more that elevates your brand if you're the designer on the North Shore that's also been featured in Apartment Therapy and Home and Garden, not just, although we love them, the North Shore News. So that's when we start thinking bigger about PR. It's something I like to tell all my clients. It's called big brand energy, thinking about yourself as like the bigger person or the bigger business you aspire to be. And then finally, when you are securing all these amazing media features, you have to put them somewhere. So this is when you get that nice, like, as seen in banner on your website. You start to collect different logos you can put there. It's also a great one to include in proposals for clients. If you want to put them in your Instagram bio or social media bio too, also a great place. But you really need to use those placements after they're published to leverage them for brand authority, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. Okay, and the last one is speaking opportunity. And this is for anyone that like wants to do more speaking or like feels a bit of a tug. I know not everybody is a public speaker or like wants to be, but it is actually such an accessible form of PR. And you can start by creating those venues yourself. So the most easy entry point is like talking head Instagram reels or videos on LinkedIn, TikTok, whichever one you prefer. That's a great place to start to position yourself as a speaker because people can actually see you talking. They can see you talking as an expert in your industry. You can also start to create your own venues. So maybe you host an online masterclass, or maybe you host a workshop in person, or you do a networking event where, mostly it's socializing, but you're going to stand up and test yourself to do like a 20-minute introduction or spiel during it. That's how you start. No one just like gets to go on, TEDx or whatever it is without kind of testing the waters first or like experimenting with speaking. So I highly recommend starting there. You also need to tell people that you're a speaker. So a lot of the time I'll have clients that are asking me like, I want to do more speaking engagement. How can I? Like, okay, well, have you told anybody? Like, no. Again, you got to tell people that we're a speaker because no one's going to give you that title for you because a lot of the time, most of us feel a bit intimidated to do public speaking. And then to get up in front of an audience for an hour or even 30 minutes, like there's so much legwork that goes into a presentation like that. So a lot of the time people don't ask someone that they think is not a speaker because they know how much work it's going to be for that person to prepare. So if you want to start speaking, or tell people. And then the best one, this goes back to my become famous in our old backyard. We have to attend events in person. It's not COVID anymore. We cannot use the excuse I'm not ready to come out of my bubble yet because your competitors are. And that is your best opportunity to have people experience you in real life. Think about all the faces you scroll by on social media every single day. Probably don't remember a lot of them. but you remember the people that you like shared space with in real life or shared energy with in real life. So I always kind of challenge myself, like, where's one place I can go this week to share my brand and business in person? And that could be as simple as like going to a coffee shop and meeting a new connection for coffee, or it can go be a larger event or something where you're going to spend a bit more time. But getting outside of the house is going to be that big driver for your business and this like famous feeling. So speaking of that, okay, so we just like did a full crash course on branding and PR. But when we think about all of the PR opportunities that are out there, they honestly all have three things in common. So if you take anything right from this presentation, I would say, okay, well, there's a couple of things. Blue ocean brands, really important, but also this. So when you start securing PR opportunities, there are three things that you want to make sure that you're doing with them. It's your unique position to become known for your work. So in any interview or article or speaking engagement, you have to speak about the things that make your brand special. If you just start talking about what your competitors are doing or things that you've seen them talk about, you're not doing anything for your brand story. You're not becoming known for your work. So that's why doing that blue ocean brand is so important to start, because now you know what you're going to talk about every time you go on a podcast or like be interviewed for something. Secondly, you need to use all of the opportunities as content. So every single one you secure, whether it's a podcast or an article or a speaking engagement, I mean, you know, Heather, shout out as my social media assistant, you know, I would like come shoot some content of the day because we'll repurpose that for ages, you know, probably in 4 months. So see me up here speaking again, but you guys might know that. I am studying that. Our audience, our following sees such a small percentage of our following sees our content every single day. So we can repurpose and reuse things that start to like bolster our brand. So for example, talking about a media placement one, good. I'm proud of you that you did it. I actually want you to talk about that media placement 3 to 5 times, but tell a different story every time. Don't just repost it. Find the angles within it to share it because you want to constantly remind people that you received that press coverage and now you're an expert in your field. So every opportunity is content. And then the third one is forming authentic relationships with those who are open to collaboration. So I look at PR much differently than a lot of PR agencies out in the world because I am very against this like transactional nature that PR can have. A lot of journalists are actually like scared of or sick of, maybe is a better word. They're sick of publicists because they just come with another story. Hey, can you write about that? Or hey, can you write about that? But if you as a business owner can go form relationships with journalists and maybe those become opportunities for larger collaboration. A good example of this, I went on a podcast in the spring, really jived with the podcast host. And then she asked me if I wanted to do like a collaborative workshop with a couple other people she had known online as like a virtual workshop that was open to all of our audiences. We had like 100 people attend this virtual event because we all shared our audiences and spoke on different areas of expertise. But that's now someone who's like a long-standing relationship in my network. I didn't just use her as an opportunity to like go on her podcast and be on her platform. I treat every relationship I am so lucky to have as a real relationship. Another really great example of this is one of my clients is a coach in like professional hockey development. So he works with, future NHL stars. So guys that are probably drafted in the next 1 to 2 years. And he is someone that I used to do PR outreach for. And then I said to him, you've got to figure out how to do this yourself. And I taught him, but for him, especially in the space that he's in, it's so much more beneficial for him to have those relationships with journalists because he's going to have a long career in hockey. And particularly in the sports industry, I would say this in formal, in any industry, but definitely in sports, if those journalists have a direct line to him, he's going to get way more features because they can just, hey, can I text you about this player that's going to be drafted? Or, hey, this guy got called up. I know you worked with him last year. Can you give me a comment? They don't need a middleman. It was actually to his benefit to not have a middleman. So I kind of like talked myself out of a job, but that's fine. We still love him. But for him, he now goes out for breakfast with these journalists. Like, they're friends. And that's what I really wanted for him. Because for his business, it was far more beneficial than having a publicist on retainer for like the rest of his career. That's not a good investment, for the record. So anyways, when you start to do all of these things, that is when you start to feel really famous in your business, because you are speaking to your unique position. So people are starting to really know you for the work that you do and can recognize you for that. People know me for personal branding and public relations, and that's what I'm often asked to speak about. The only thing I speak about, actually. We use opportunities as content, and you will find the more that you can share these amazing press placements that you secure or these features. If you have authentic relationships with your community, they're going to hype you up and they're going to love those press placements. They're going to cheer you on. So that's why forming authentic relationships are also so important, because that's how you start to open more doors for your business. So just to wrap this up, this is what sets you apart from the Kim Kardashians of the world. For anyone that was nervous to raise their hand when they asked you if you ever wanted to be famous because you didn't want to feel like you were just pursuing fame, you're not. You're growing a business that has an impact. You have a positive impact on your clients and the work that you do. And that's why we want to share it with the world, because people deserve to know more about you and your business and the impact that you have. So I think this was from Brad Pitt. I mean, I didn't quality check this. ChatGPT gave it to me and it sounded pretty good. So for all of you as business owners, fame is a byproduct of doing what you love. It's not the goal itself. So, and on that note, I'm Katrina. This is where you can follow me on Instagram so I can see all of your amazing press placements. And maybe we have time for questions. Yeah, I got the thumbs up. So
one part of public relations that I know we didn't touch upon, but is important, and I'm sure you help people with too, is because of cancel culture and stuff, is crisis PR.
I'm not a big crisis PR girl. I like to stay in the warm and fluffy, but it does happen. And understanding, how to manage the storylines around that comes from having a tight grip on your brand and knowing what your values are, your mission, your vision, all of those things. So you can tie whatever crisis you're having back to that. Reputation management is also important. I'm sure a lot of us have like Google business profiles. People love to go on the Google business and leave a bad review, sometimes unwarranted. So even how you respond to that can really change your perception. But yeah, not the crisis PR expert, but it is a big one.
Just speaking, as an entrepreneur, how about our second businesses, what is there a formula that they like? What percentage of your time should make sense in getting yourself famous? Be it either, outsourcing that to come and help you with that, or, internally what it should be. It's sort of a formula.
Yeah. So my formula really is starting with that brand building component. Percentage wise, I actually think that, and I had actually developed programs that support business owners in learning how to build out their brands and then pitch it, because I actually believe that a larger percentage of building your brand is actually more important than the time you spend pitching. If you're spending more time pitching, probably because you haven't positioned your brand or business in a way where it just receives of opportunities organically, and not the place we all like to get to. So I would say like different formulas or percentage wise, like brand building as a whole, or like this is your brand and PR effort, I would say, I'm scared to put it on my check. I would say 70% brand building and then 30% PR, because a lot of those PR opportunities should be coming to you if you've done a solid job of communicating your brand out there, like getting it out into the world. And then as for like how many resources should we allocate to it, or if we're ready for it, like I guess it depends where you're at in your business. So is it lead generation that you want, or is it like increasing prices, or is it something else? It depends on what the goal is. But I guess that's a great way to kind of demonstrate that everyone's brand and PR plan would be so different, because we tailor them really specifically to what. Is that cool? Okay. I think that's it for me. Thank you so much, Katrina.